Welcome to the nation's capital. My name is Hilary Powell, and I'm a video journalist based here in Washington, D.C. for the Associated Press. This is AP Black Voter Voices. I've been so excited to host this conversation. With less than 2 weeks until the midterm elections, voters are already early in absentee voting. Some of those ballots include, of course, Black voters, who make up 13% of the country's eligible voters. It's increased a little bit even since last cycle. African-American voters on both sides of the aisle and in the middle are weighing in. Today's panelists tell me the Black vote matters and represents a critical voting bloc. And joining me today are several esteemed women. And I'm just going to let you introduce yourselves, starting with Dr. Fields.
I'm really happy to be here. My name is Jesse Fields. I'm a medical doctor, physician in the Harlem community. I'm affiliated with Mount Sinai in Manhattan, in Harlem, and I do a lot in the community. I'm also an independent. I'm an activist involved in a lot of community issues, and glad to be here today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Colette Alston. I am currently the president of the African American Caucus for the North Carolina Democratic Party. I reside in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm formerly the president of the African American Caucus here in Mecklenburg. And we are hard at the wall in making sure that the Black vote is very well represented throughout the state of North Carolina.
My name is Whitley Yates. I am the Director of Diversity for the Indiana Republican Party, the president of the Greater Indianapolis Republican Women's Club. I have started a diversity leadership series to get more African Americans and Hispanics into the Republican Party. And I'm excited to have this conversation and hear perspectives from around the country.
We're going to take this conversation where you guys lead it. 7 in 10 Black people in the U.S. are eligible to vote, according to Pew Research. And Black eligible voters are known for high voter turnout as a strong bloc. And they represent at least 50% of the eligible voters usually turn out to vote during midterms. So how are you feeling about your party's outreach and Black voters as we approach November 8th? The floor is open to anyone.
I was a little hesitant because, as you know, I'm an independent. So I'm really proud not to be affiliated with any political party, because I think political independence is important for the African American community. I mean, as I said, I work as a physician, and certainly the health problems and disparities are enormous. And that's just one area: issues of housing, mass incarceration, police violence, etc. So many social conditions and issues of inequality and poverty, and problems in terms of the schools and lack of real opportunity through education because of the failure of our education policies. So for me, it seems to me very important that the African American community not be taken for granted and not only have one choice, but be able to engage in politics in a way that really helps the people, that really helps the community, the Black community and other communities. So that's my perspective. I'm a big supporter of political independence for our country.
We don't have the participation that we need to have across the United States, not just with our Black community, because of the way the United States has designated eligibility, voting rights. And if we're not all seen as Americans, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. The reason that we all have voting rights is because we weren't even seen as a whole person. So I want to start us getting through the conversation of completely changing our politics and the laws and the structure of our politics, and actually having, if you're American, then you owe America your participation in all voting processes, but we're not taught that. And so I think that with our parties, it is our responsibility to start that engagement and to bring more people in to understand what we need to change within our system. We have a little hashtag with our organization that says know the system to change the system. So we shouldn't even be having conversations about eligibility, voting rights. Once you turn 18, just like you can get drafted, and just like you have to represent your United States in certain ways, you need to go ahead and be mandated to vote and participate in the process.
So I have to respectfully disagree. I think we should be talking about eligibility specifically when it comes to the Black community. When you see elections being federalized at a national level and allowing people who should not be partaking in our election system voting. And that usually is undocumented citizens. Just because you're in America doesn't make you an American. And there are many of my ancestors, your ancestors, and Dr. Fields' ancestors that fought and died for our right to vote. And so to allow people who are not a part of our system, who do not pay taxes into the system, to be able to sway the votes based upon their locality and not anything else, I think is wrong. And I think it does harm to the Black community. The truth of the matter is the reason why Black people aren't turning out is because they don't feel like their votes matter. And the reason they don't feel like their votes matter is because politicians, decade after decade, time after time, have ignored Black votes. They propagate our poverty, but never produce policies that progress our communities. And so people are disenfranchised with voting for something that they don't see actual tangible change into. And that comes from both parties and all people within the political spectrum. As we are heading into these midterms right now, there is a strong push for tangible policies that impact the Black community and Black community only. We do not want to get siloed into the word minority. We don't want to be put into these other groups. We want tangible policies that impact our communities. And we haven't necessarily received them from the left or the right. So as we heard Dr. Fields say, it should be Hugh first, it should be community first. And aligning, left, right, or independent has not necessarily served us. And the truth of the matter is, until we are able to put the power back into the hands of the people, then we may continue to have some low voter turnout, specifically in Black communities, until we can show how that change impacts their daily life.
It's really important at the end of the day for people to understand the education behind our political process in order to understand how the political process affects them right where they are. And that is a lot of what we're doing through the African American Caucus with the Black Democrats and our independents here in North Carolina, to let people know, when you vote for this person, this is how this affects you directly. We don't want to be in a situation where something happens when, just for an example, we have to protest for something, right? Don't just go out here and get mad and, protest and break and fire up things. Understand the people that are in office that you need to go and start either pulling out of office when you vote, or just vote, period, and understand how that person and how that office is going to affect you. So we try to make sure we direct our issues towards who can best represent and fix those issues for us.
Can we stay with this topic a little bit? I was going to get to it a little further down, but it seems to be really passionate for everyone. And, how might the current political process need any more reform? An AP NORC poll shows that about 3/4 of U.S. adults say misinformation is leading to more extremism and more extreme political views. So do we need to take a look at how polarizing it's become right now this year?
We have to remove the transactionality out of politics and stop making people and politicians feel like your vote is a gift, because it's not a gift, right? I'm expecting something for it. And the truth is that when you're looking at the political system as a whole, and when you're looking at where the power lies, so much of it seems to lie with the politicians and the party, but really it's with the people. And that's where it should be. And that's where it should remain. And that's where it should stay. If you have placed someone in a position of power and they are no longer representing the ideas of that community and advocating for what the constituency says, and they're advocating for their own personal agenda, then they're no longer representing you. It's no longer a democracy. It's no longer a republic. And so we, as citizens, as the voting bloc, have the right to remove them, to have them answer the tough questions necessary, to look at what they've done, not just what they say they're going to do, and then to act accordingly. But I think instead what happens specifically with Black people is basically we're told to, vote blue no matter who, whether or not they represent what we represent, whether or not their values are in alignment with ours, and whether or not their policies are in alignment with our priorities. And I think that this idea that you should vote blue no matter who, or that all people that look like you are advocating for policies that impact you positively is a farce and a fallacy that has been propagated throughout the entire political process. The truth is, we should look at policies and not only what they say they're going to do, but what they've done. And that doesn't necessarily mean while in office. If you're running for office and you've never held a position, well, what did you do philanthropically to change your community?
Hilary, I did want to follow up on the issue about polarization. I think it is a major issue. I think the African-American community and other communities of color, Native American, Latinx, communities of color have an important leadership role to play in our country and, across the country. Polarization is a real problem. When I introduced myself, I didn't mention that I contributed to a book, The Independent Voter, which just came out by the directors of the Center in Arizona State University Center for an Independent and Sustainable Democracy, which just launched in Washington, D.C. last week. And they're looking at the issue of polarization and partisanship, and very much supporting how valuable nonpartisanship would be in our country, particularly in how our elections work. The elections in state after state are run by partisans. The parties, when you look at election law in different states, the rules are that the parties get to decide who the poll workers are, who the monitors are from each side. But that's like having the people in, the teams, representatives, judging, refereeing the process. It's not fair. Most Western democracies have a nonpartisan election administration. We do not. And I think it's one of the reasons that people are distrusting our democracy and the outcome of elections, especially when elections are close. So I think the quality of our political process is very important. And right now it's corroding. It's getting, worse and worse, and people don't have faith in it.
Dr. Fields, I have a quick question for you. If you see that 96% of the voting bloc votes Democrat, how do you feel like, specifically within the Black community, how do you feel like polarization plays a role if 96% or 94% of Black people are voting one way?
Well, if you talk to people in the African-American community, you'll find a diversity of views, and there is a significant percentage of Black independents. Now, if the people on the ballot are Democrats and Republicans, most of the candidates on the ballot are Democrats and Republicans. So yes, the African-American community has voted majority Democrat. I don't think that they're going to start voting Republican, and I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating greater choices and changing the whole process. So the issue of polarization affects everybody. It affects the entire country. It is something that our politics is very dysfunctional. If you look at all the crises in housing and health, we just had a pandemic. We did very poorly through the COVID pandemic. We should have done a lot better. And the African-American community suffered disproportionately. So our politics and our public policy need to be better. And I think dealing with polarization is an important part of improving our public policy.
Let's talk a little bit more about misinformation. It's something that's been at the forefront for primaries and now for midterms. Brookings Institution identifies hundreds of candidates who have expressed election denial beliefs, false claims that the presidential election in 2020 was flawed. And they've been tracking this the whole year, breaking it down from the states we have represented here. Indiana has 4 election deniers. New York has 6. North Carolina has 8. Do you trust the candidates on the ballot for November who are standing on this debunked lie?
We've had other people, Hillary Clinton, deny that they lost an election. We've had other people in Florida, gubernatorial candidates who lost elections, Democratic, deny the results of the election. The truth of the matter is, it's hard to lose. And people don't like to do it. And sometimes when they lose and there are irregularities, then they have something to say. We did see irregularities in Michigan, specifically during the election season with some software. And that's something that I don't think that we can afford to have in this country when it's already in a place or position that is very critical and almost fragile at this point, where people don't even feel as though their voices are being heard, to have any type of an irregularity is a problem. And so I think that it's really important that we make it ridiculously easy for eligible people to vote and make it hard for anybody or any software to be able to accidentally switch votes from one person to another. When it comes to those election deniers on the ballot in Indiana, there are going to be people that are with them and there are going to be people that are against them. I haven't seen any data to suggest that President Trump won this election and that there was some widespread voter fraud that happened. I haven't seen the data. The courts haven't seen the data. Joe Biden is our president, and that's my personal opinion. But what I believe versus what other people believe has absolutely like nothing to do with how they're going to vote. And the truth of the matter is, if this is an issue that drives people to the polls, then the issue of election security should also drive people to the polls as well.
I need for everybody to understand, which I don't understand just as a person in politics, especially in the Democratic Party, why we have that many different counties that have their different way in which they do things. We need to start to come together with this process, and we're talking about fixing the political process of standardization. That way we won't have a ton of questions from a ton of different areas on how we do things. And I think that trust would be a whole lot more solid if we could see a lot of people doing the same thing for the way in which we need to manage these elections. Here in North Carolina, we have 100 counties. So we have 100 different board of elections. And depending on, who our governor is at the time, is going to be that standpoint of who is on our board for the board of elections in each of those counties and which party is in control. So it shouldn't be, to me, partisan in that way, but we need to start coming together, like you guys were saying, and actually understanding a standardization so that we can remove a lot of these questions across all of these counties across the United States of America when it comes to board of elections and our elections process.
I don't think standardization is always equitable, and that's the truth. And here in Indiana, while we do have 92 counties, the Secretary of State's office runs, so there is the standardization through the Secretary of State's office, but each county is able to do what's best for them. So what Indianapolis does, which is one of the most urban and densely populated cities, is not going to be what Fulton County does. That's rural. And what we do in Indianapolis should not be placed upon another county that has different demographic, that has different people. I don't think that standardization is always equitable, and I think we have to be careful. But yeah. I do understand building and creating a level of trust so that there are some familiarity strands that exist throughout the process.
Yeah. When I'm talking standardization, I'm talking more about systems and processes rather than inequity. So if one board of elections is using a process, why can't every board of elections use the same process, use the same system, use the same way in which they count votes across every county of the United States? That is making it fair for everyone because everyone is expecting the same result out of that process. So I just wanted to counter with that.
I see Dr. Fields wants to.
Yeah, I was just, the important ingredient as I see it is that it be nonpartisan, that it not be run by the political parties, that it be a commission, independent. There are different ways of establishing that, but that was the part that I thought was important. The nonpartisanship, the distance from the outcome of the election, not people who are on one side or the other.
President Biden recently said democracy itself is on the ballot. And only about half of Americans have high confidence that votes in the upcoming midterms will actually be counted accurately. And that's according to an AP North poll recently. Now, do you guys hear in your community people saying, I feel like I have concerns about being disenfranchised, or I have concerns about everything that we're talking about?
There's a comfortability so far of where we are in people not feeling disenfranchised with this process, and having enough locations to go to for early vote that it's expansive across the state. That was hugely important. And that too is maintained by our Board of Elections. So here in Mecklenburg County, in the county in which I live, we have over, I want to say 20 to 30 voting locations across the county. to make it easier for people to be able to access and get to them if they don't want to vote on voting day. So far, we're doing pretty good, Hilary, in North Carolina.
Anybody else up there in New York or Whitley out in Indiana? That's my home state. And
in Indiana, it's a little bit different. We, everything we kind of do, it's like together. So we have, Democrats, we have Republicans, we have libertarians here. We collect ballots together. Not one party just doesn't go and collect ballots. It's a representative from both parties or the Libertarian Party. They go and collect the ballots together. So you don't necessarily hear a lot about disenfranchisement when it comes to being able to vote in the process. A lot of times it is voter transportation, voter information, and barriers to that. We are a vote center county here in Marion County, and the entire state will probably eventually become a vote center county, meaning you don't have to go to a specific location or your polling place to vote. You can vote anywhere, any place that voting is open, you are eligible to vote there, and you can go and you can vote there. And that has really reduced a lot of barriers for people who may have been at work and a polling place is closer to them. And so that has been very helpful. We do have voter ID laws here. We've had them for years, and they're great because we offer free IDs for people so that they can vote. We offer free public transportation for people to get to the polls. And so we've attempted to do everything within our power to mitigate any of the voter access and barriers to get to the polls. And so I'm very proud about that.
I see Dr. Fields nodding your head. Anything you wanted to add?
Well, I was thinking about the communities that I work with, the African American community, people who live in public housing. My practice is surrounded by folks who live in public housing in Harlem, and I think that people feel distant from the process in terms of whether it will make a difference if they vote. I think everyone should vote, but people, for instance, I'm working a lot in supporting people who live in public house, supporting public housing. There are a lot of health issues, and it's very important. And it's being, communities are being gentrified and people are being displaced. And in New York, we're fighting to maintain the public housing and to have the residents actually be able to participate in running it and managing it. But I think there's a gap between which keeps people, I think, from participating, what they feel the elected officials will do, if they will be held accountable, because they just voted in New York State and passed this privatization plan for public housing, and the residents very much are trying to slow it down. So it's Democrats voted for it, Republicans as well, but the majority in the legislature in the House is Democrats. So I think there's a lot of distance and a lot of work to do to be able to hold our elected officials accountable and make them responsive, so people feel that it matters. Many young people don't vote. Many people in our communities are not participating because they don't think it makes a difference.
You talked about housing. Let's move a little bit over to the economy. When I talk to people, I feel like that's at the top of their minds right now. But when we think about the pandemic, as Dr. Fields mentioned, and that some people aren't thinking about it anymore, but Black entrepreneurs are trying to recover after bearing that economic brunt, also a lot of health outcomes as well. And while battling record inflation that we've seen this year, what candidates to you, or what policies are speaking to concerns about making sure the Black community has an equitable shot at economic progress as we go into this next year?
This person is not a candidate, but this is someone who I think is sincere and trying to make a difference, and that is Andrew Yang. His uniform income distribution, his policy to give everyone a certain amount of money, $1,000. When he was running for president in the Democratic primary, he advocated for a uniform guaranteed income. He is now moving on and is interested in, beginning the Forward Party. I think that kind of a proposal for a basic income is something that actually Dr. King supported I think there's a lot more that we can do to support our communities, more investment directly. And part of nonpartisanship and independence means being able to really support the community beyond taking a political stand one way or the other, but supporting programs that are innovative, that really impact on people, that really help people. I'm on the board of the All Stars Project, which is a program, an after-school program for young people. And we use performance and introduce young people to businesses, to healthcare, to the arts, and so forth. So those kinds of programs, innovative programs that are really developmental and quality programs, I think are important in helping our communities to have more opportunities, including economic opportunity.
This is a heavy topic when it comes to economics, because I think that the Black community as a whole is basically at the bottom of every statistic. We are one of the most marginalized groups of people, specifically Black people who are descendants of chattel slavery within this country. And I do not think that it is by accident at all. I think that we have been locked out of policies over decades that would have propelled us, such as the FHA, and allowing us to be able to build generational wealth for our families. And because we've had policies that have specifically excluded us from taking advantage of them in a time where we needed them most, I think it is incumbent upon those running for office to look at how they can provide restitution specifically to groups who have been disenfranchised by policies such as redlining that we've seen in this country. And so I think a lot of Black people felt like when the issue with Ukraine happened and we began sending billions of dollars to another country to help them in a situation or a problem that they were having, and they looked in their communities and they looked around and they didn't feel that the government was helping them in a way, the same government that produced policies consistently that have specifically disenfranchised them, specifically targeted them harsher, they felt hopeless that there was going to be any change. And so when we talk about economics and being able to have economic mobility and economic wealth, we can't frame that conversation without understanding how policies have negatively impacted Black generational wealth for decades in this country. And so how do you fix or repair that? Honestly, it's a really big passion project for me, but it's something that I feel like our politicians need to be looking at right now, not something 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but looking at it right now. Closing the wealth gap would mean repairing some of the harm that was done, in 1930s and 1940s when we were locked out of a lot of these government programs that were meant to help American people.
Well, the question about who am I supporting as far as a candidate, I'm going to say pretty much everyone that is on our Democratic slate that's running to be in a House seat in the United States Congress, we fully support, because there are policies of the people that are representing us today and that more that we're trying to get into to actually enhance those policies for North Carolina are helping the whole entire United States. One in particular, Congresswoman Alma Adams. She is very well connected and helpful for our HBCU community across the United States, and the funding that is being poured back into those communities and those institutions. And also, in which 10 of them are in North Carolina, but also she's looking at Black maternal health and how Black women are most affected by a lot of fallacies that happen in our health community whenever we're having babies. So she's actually put a lot in place from a North Carolina standpoint that's actually affecting the United States as a whole. So I'm going to say the ones that can affect us the most and affect change the most for our state at this point, when we're talking about candidates, are the people that we're actually sending to Congress to actually get those policies in order and to help them filter throughout the rest of the United States.
Let's get into the impact of the Dobbs decision and the politicizing pregnancy, really, that we've seen this cycle. The Eagleton Institute reports two key voting blocks. Of course, women and young voters are more likely to support abortion, more likely to vote Democratic. How do you see this decision, and how do you see abortion access playing out in your states?
I think that, of course, I disagree with the decision. I support a woman's right to choose, and women, and very importantly, for Black women to have options in terms of reproductive health. And the decision is having a negative effect on the issues of Black maternal and infant mortality and the disparities there that Ms. Alston was just mentioning, which are very, very important. And really, our country has seen an increase in Black maternal mortality and infant mortality, which I know you've highlighted, Hilary, in your work. So I think it's very important. It's going to have a negative effect. In my state, in New York, fortunately, women do have access. That in other states, Black women will have less access. It's been a problem even before the decision. It will be more of a problem now. And I think it's something that is important to change. It's really a health issue for women being able to make decisions, and Black women have higher maternal mortality because of disparities, because of hypertension in pregnancy and so forth. And it is not just an issue of economics, it's across the board. We see it in women who, in doctors and tennis stars like Serena Williams and others, as well as poor women. So I think it's a major and very important issue. And I think that Black women are going to express themselves in this election on that and many other issues.
I'm going to be honest, as a mother and a single mother as well, who has had some of the exact same issues that Dr. Fields is speaking about, I am more of an advocate for making sure that Black women are advocating for our health in a way that produces equitable outcomes for us to have children. I don't believe that the solution to us being mistreated in the healthcare industry is to have more abortions. I am just someone who doesn't believe in that. Now, I understand in matters of extreme health, life of the mother, rape, incest, etc., but those only account for such a small, like less than 1% of all abortions. And so what I think we need to be doing is not only, at least as a Republican Party, being pro-life, but being pro-livelihood. So what will the life of that child be once they're here? If you want more babies to be born, and if you want more women to choose life, we have to make sure that we're supporting the lives, not only that we have here, but also the livelihood of what that child is going to be. I'm someone who grew up in a state-funded orphanage here in Indiana. And so I completely understand, living in a division of 25 girls from all around this state who were basically orphans, how we have systems that need to be fixed. And so I think it's bigger than just looking at the issue of reproductive health, but looking at the entire system. How are we supporting foster care children? How are we increasing adoption? I'm also adopted. How are we increasing the livelihood of all the children that are going to be here, as well as making sure that women have equitable access to health and that they're able to advocate for themselves in a way that allows them to have a level of care necessary to thrive in America?
I agree with a lot of Dr. Fields said, and actually, Ms. Yates, a lot of what you said. I will say this to answer Hilary's question. Yeah, abortion is on the ballot. And for something that took so long to have a woman have their own right to choose how they manage their body and what they need for themselves and their family, for it to be overturned, that is in itself bringing a lot more people out to vote because people are angry. And at the end of the day, I don't know that it's up to a government to control the life of anyone. And I firmly believe that a woman should always have the right to choose how her outcome is going to be. based upon a lot of what Ms. Yates was talking about when the child gets here. So once that, I think, can get fixed and changed, then we wouldn't even be having a case about a government needing to intervene on what a woman can and can't do with her body. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. But when you're put into a situation where you now don't have that right, and for, I don't know, eons, this country is built on white male America at the end of the day. So women, it took them a long time just to get to be able to be seen as a whole person. And then once got seen as a whole person, get through Roe v. Wade. So Black people came after all of that. And we're still trying to catch up. So I need for America just to start to look at everyone as Americans that are American here and not Black, white, whatever. We need to be looking at us as Americans. And that within itself will start to get us to be a part more of this system and to be more participative and to understand it a whole lot better of what's better for all of us and not just talking about a Black vote, So that's where I want to see us get to.
With the same government that gave us the right to be able to have abortion is the same government that took it away. And so just because something is legal doesn't mean it's right, because there was a time that slavery was legal and that was not right. So we have to be very careful placing so much trust. And I speak as someone that's in law school, in a legal system that has shown us the duality of the decisions that they've consistently made. And I find it interesting that when this decision, Roe v. Wade, was put into place, there were no women on the Supreme Court. And now we have even more women on the Supreme Court that have overturned it. And so I think for us in the Black community in particular, we have so many things that we need to be advocating for, that we need to be talking about, that we need to be standing up for. And this is one of those issues. And so when you're hearing it from doctors, we had a doctor in Indiana suffer from some of the exact same thing that Dr. Fields is speaking about, a medical doctor dying and not being listened to by her own medical doctors. And this is honestly, it's historical. So our hesitation in this entire system and trusting the system is historical, because the books that taught some of these doctors eons ago, as you were saying, said that we had a higher tolerance rate, said that we shouldn't be given certain prescription medications and different things like this. So these entrenched held beliefs that were taught legally in this country are now pervasive in how we've been treated. And so we have to just be very cognizant of how we got here and what it's going to take to have that center change, and for there to be this catalyst of change necessary to drive us forward. Because we didn't get here overnight. It didn't just happen at Dobbs, and it didn't happen at Roe v. Wade, because we still had issues prior to all of these things. And so just making sure that we're advocating from a place of historical context so that we can make the changes necessary is important.
So, but am I hearing that everyone is in agreement that whoever is on the ballot needs to be talking about equity and centering equity in healthcare, especially for Black women?
I would say the polls are not showing that Dobbs or abortion is a top issue, which is interesting. It's crime, it's inflation. So to say that, I think is through a siloed lens. So I would say for some, they want it to be on the ballot, but for others, it is quality of life right now.
I think it's a major issue that people are responding to. However, I think we could agree, the three of us could agree on the basic things that people need. That equity is important, that equality, social and economic equality for the African-American community and others, and the people being able to come together. My point is that we can have conversations. We can say, well, we disagree on these things, but we need to be able to talk and have dialogues and work together. That has to happen. And unfortunately, in our country, people have been so divided that it's very difficult to do that. And I think the parties kind of use that to try and win elections, and the divisions are growing. We have to get beyond those divisions. We have to be able to come together and have dialogue and talk to each other and support inclusion and equality. very important.
I'm seeing lots of head nodding. Okay, we're going into our last kind of flash round. It's been just my honor to have this fire forum of Black women expressing really important viewpoints. And I just wanted to give the floor back to you and just say, what aren't candidates speaking enough about?
Loving my state of North Carolina. I'm born and raised here. And I'm a Democrat. I still have issues within my own party, and particularly within my own race in this state, of people just not really understanding offices and candidates holding the offices that they hold and what those offices mean to all of us. And I want to see more of a concerted effort for when someone's running for office to start connecting the dots for all of us. So if someone's running for US Senate, what does that mean to my county commission? What does that mean for my state legislature when you get to DC? How are we trickling down back through the states, and how are we bubbling up to the White House? A lot of people don't understand that every office is interconnected within our government. There's somebody to do something for something, but you might have to depend on another piece of government in order for you to push something through. So I'd like to see more of an effort whenever people are running for office to make that connectivity, to make it plain for us, and why, when we're voting in a party structure, why we're trying to get all Democrats somewhere in order for something to get done. If we're trying to get all Republicans somewhere, why? And who's going to work together in order for all of these functioning pieces of government to be right for our communities and right for us?
I would say one of the things that I'm not hearing enough of are solutions. I'm hearing a lot about the problems. They're keeping the problems at the forefront of everyone's mind. We know inflation is high. I just filled up my tank. It was $5 a gallon, and I live in one of the most cheapest states to live in this country. And so we're talking about inflation. We're talking about gas prices. We're talking about the problem. And the solution just can't be put me in a position of power and I'm going to change it. No, I need to know the steps. Like, what is it that you're going to do or provide that currently doesn't exist that is going to alter these things? And so, and this is on both sides, I'm seeing this. No one is going around talking about the solutions or what they plan to do. And so I think it's incumbent upon people in the next 2 weeks, incumbent upon those on the ballot, to make a connection. And what are you going to? I know what someone's not doing. I know where we are and how it impacts my life, my pocketbook, my children, my dollar, et cetera. But what is it that you are actually going to do? What ideas do you have that are going to change these things? Because usually what happens is they get in the position and then everything usually just kind of stays the same. And so I'm looking for some solutionaries. And you should have the solutions prior to getting into office, because you've been connected with the community and you've listened and you've learned and created a plan that you feel is going to help the constituents that you represent. And so I don't want you to wait till you get in the position of power and then try to figure it out. I want you to be talking to the community now. We work together to come up with a solution that is ours, not yours, so that we can all win together. And so I'm not seeing enough of that coalition building and community organizing on a level that says, I want to speak to the people who are going to vote for me and the people who aren't, so that when I'm making decisions, those decisions help all of the people that I represent, not just the ones who voted for me.
The politicians, people running for office, the major party politicians are doing what they think they need to do and positioning themselves in order to win the election. And they may talk about solutions, but I think the solutions, there are things that can be done which are positive and can make a difference. But I don't think that the current political process can give us solutions that are going to be transformative enough to really make a difference, particularly to generations in the African American, Native American, other communities of color, to the poor who have been poor for generations and disenfranchised and marginalized. I think we need transformative change, and our political process right now does not allow for that. That's why I think my focus is on qualitatively changing, transforming the political process itself, the democracy itself. I think that's what our focus needs to be. And I wish that elected officials would discuss that, but I don't think they have an understanding of that, and they're just trying to get elected. I think that's a problem.
Well, Ms. Alston, Ms. Yates, and Dr. Fields, it's just been my honor. It's always exciting for me to bring together different voices and also see those voices find common ground. And I thank you for lending your vital voices to this conversation. This has been AP's Black Voter Voices, and reporting for the Associated Press, I'm Hilary Powell. Thanks for tuning in.